will now proceed with the first panel of the day, entitled The Push for the Right Infrastructure Deployments. And the panelists are Fabio Fontana, CEO ZeroPoint DC and Chief Growth Officer Tonomus.NEOM, Femi Oshiga, VP Sales, Service Provider, CommScope MEA and APAC, Engineer Abdulrahman bin Hamad AlMufadda, CTO Zain KSA, Deepak Winston, Director, Digital and Emerging Tech, EY, Walter Miron, VP Networks, TELUS, Fahad Abdulrahman Al CTO, SCC Kuwait, Abdullah Al Chaer, Head of Network Quality and Optimization, DU. And moderating this session, Mikhail Romanov, EMEIA, Transformation Leader, EY. Welcome on stage.
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I think we have an exciting topic. If 5G still excites you, then I think it's going to be an interesting discussion. Also, the topic is actually about the proper investments and what we need to share and what we need to co-invest in and what we need to invest in individually as operators, as service providers, with the advent of 5G. So let me just start by maybe setting it up a little bit for us. So the infrastructure sharing model, has expanded over the years. If you recall, I think all of us were around 10, 15 years ago. Yes, there are no terribly young people in this panel, yeah? Remember when infrastructure was considered a competitive advantage, and everyone was saying, well, no, it's not about sharing because, we're investing, we're building. The faster we build, the more fiber we lay, the more towers we get, up, basically the more competitive our business is going to be. Not necessarily the case today. So if we're looking at the tower codes and how they developed into, much more than towers today, in the late 90s, early 2000s, it's, with steel and grass, towers coming up, and sometimes they'd house more than one operator. 3, if you're lucky, 5 would be an excellent opportunity. And then that model has expanded to, passive equipment, fiber, and what we have today is basically, digital infracos. And then, where it's going to lead us, well, I guess that's one of the discussions we're going to have at this panel. The market for infrastructure sharing, it's growing, and our stats are actually showing that it's positioned to grow, well into 25, 26, 27, as far as we can predict, with a fairly, reasonable CAGR. And what we're actually seeing is that there are consolidations and spin-offs in the market happening still. Even in 2022, I was just reviewing some documents, we have between 5 and 10 quite significant consolidations, well, significant transactions as such. You remember the Telefonica last year, close to 10 billion. We're having Vantage Towers Vodafone this year. I think, was it solidified in November? Or at least it was, it was going to be, again, close to 10 billion. That's fairly large, which means that there's interest. Now, coming back to the original topic of this discussion, 5G. Now, 5G, brings a slew of new opportunities. There's IoT en masse, there's the critical infrastructure, then there's the enhanced mobile broadband. And I think that raises this question anew. What do we invest in, and what we can share and co-invest in, yeah? And so with 5G, I think it just makes that question a little bit more focused, and hopefully that is something that we would be able to, to actually get some answers to today. But let me then maybe come back to the very first point of this discussion, which is fiber versus 5G. We started off with fiber, we're going from 1G to 5G, we're in the 5G space. Right now, new opportunities when it comes to 5G, but we still have the backbone, we still have the fiber. So, Mr. Al-Ali, if you don't mind, I'll start with you. What do you think if we were to look at fiber versus 5G? Are they cannibalizing each other or are they complementing each other?
Actually, Al-Ali is here.
Sorry?
It's me, Al-Ali.
Yeah, sorry.
I'll start taking where Dr. Atisto, I think her name, when she mentioned the beautiful mission this morning related to connecting the unconnected in Asia Pacific. I feel, let's say, from the humanity part, I feel sorry that still until today we have areas that are unconnected. And I think we as a human being, we should do something to help those societies and communities. Going to the point, talking about fiber cannibalizing 5G or 5G cannibalizing fiber, from our perspective, we don't see it this way. We see they work closely together, complementing each other. We are investing a lot. We are helping also the market to digitize in Kuwait. Fiber penetration is low, so we decided to go in the last mile connectivity over 5G with very high speeds and good latencies to complement the portfolio that we have in our B2B and our B2C markets. So those, let's say, verticals, they require first the connectivity. Last mile cannot be done without fiber backhauling. So this is the reason we see both complement each other. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Al-Ali. Now, we appreciate that there is a geographical dimension. Yeah, so Engineer Al-Mufadda, perhaps you have a different perspective on it. You know, different country, different topology, you know, different mix of operators. Do you share Mr. Al-Ali's point of view in terms of sharing, or complementing rather, or, for example, in Kuwait, you would still be looking at competitive advantage?
Well, let me address it from a different angle. Okay, let's talk about the basics. What the end user, either it's individual or enterprise, looking for. Simply, they are looking for services with high quality of service in terms of speed, latency. They're looking for a stable service and affordable services as well. In the best period, this can be offered only through fiber. However, with the development happening in the wireless technology, there is a new player coming in the market, which is 5G. Because 5G can offer the high quality of service in terms of speed, latency, high availability services, and on top of that, a more cost-efficient solution as well. And it's not only that. Also, in talking about time to market, deployment, it's much faster and easier.
Yeah.
Especially talking about countries, large countries like Saudi Arabia, where the main cities are flat, where we have a long distance and remote areas, which the fiber reachability cost to reach in all this area will be huge. On top of that, the most important differentiator when we're talking about wireless or 5G specifically is the mobility flavor. So this helping us to, as mentioned, connect the unconnected and covering all these internet gaps. So for example, in 2 years in Zain, Saudi Arabia, we managed to reach that 63% of the population covered with the 5G technology. Imagine if we're going to do
63%.
63% of the population in Saudi Arabia covered with 5G technology. Imagine how much it will cost you and how long it will take to achieve those numbers through fiber. And we are talking only about the beginning of the 5G, and we are still exploring the capability of 5G. And the focus was in the past period only about one use case, which is the fixed wireless access. Imagine with 5.5 or 5G advanced, or even beyond that, what kind of capabilities, solutions, and application we can offer for our customers. While saying that, still, I'm not saying that 5G will eliminate the needs of fiber. But what we are seeing, that, okay, it will complement each other because, okay, our strategy in Zain, okay, that we are using 5G from access side to reach the customers, while with the big demand in the traffic, that we raise big demand in backhauling. So we are using the fiber network for the backhauling. So having the 5G in the access side and having the fiber in the backhauling side are complementing each other to achieve our ultimate goal, which is supporting and having a digital economy and society.
Thank you very much. So what you're basically saying, if I'm getting it right, both Mr. Al-Ali and Engineer Al-Mufadda, you are looking at them as complementing each other in the long term also. Or what you're basically saying is that when there's going to be fiber, there will be no need for 5G, at least for fixed line connection. Or you see them sort of working together in the long term also.
Personally, I believe it's go together. You cannot have this advanced services in the long run, especially going for the advanced technology without having the 5G backhaul with the fiber connectivity.
Understood. Thank you. Now, from the standpoint of do, perhaps, yeah, we're looking at yet another geography, another country with two major operators present. What's your point of view?
So from our side, what we see, 5G and fiber, really this depends on the use case and the end customer requirement, right? For an operator such as where we have fiber and then we started having 5G. So I'll give you an example. If you have a large enterprise, for example, where they want hundreds and hundreds gigs of capacity towards their data centers, for example, or towards their call centers, then the most appropriate option here would be fiber. Now, there's nothing that prevents you from doing it through 5G. However, maybe it won't be economically feasible compared to fiber. And if you look at it, it really depends on case by case. So, for example, if you have a greenfield operator, where
what operator? Sorry.
Come again.
Sorry, there's a bit of a feedback, and I'm not sure if you hear the panelists quite well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So also, and like what the gentlemen have said, depending if it's a greenfield operator who wants a very quick access to the market and acquisition of the market, then going with the 5G from day one would be the best option here. So from our standpoint of view, we look at that they complement each other. They are part of our product portfolio. Different cards that our CMO and commercial team can play with.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rahman. Now, one thing I didn't mention in the very beginning, when I was talking about the towercos, in terms of ownership, it's actually quite different. So, for example, if in MENA, they're mostly captives, captive firms, then in North America, a lot of the towercos are actually independently owned. I think it's upwards of 65%. So perhaps Walter, as representing an operator that is originally from North America. Again, I'm not yet going to the sharing topic. For what's of interest right now is fiber and 5G topic. Do you have sort of a different angle when you look at it, or is it pretty much the same, complement all the way?
Well, thanks for your question, Mikhail, and I wanted to thank Tony and our sponsors as well for this great the opportunity of the summit, and it's fantastic to be visiting the region again. Coming back to your question, I agree with my colleagues on the panel that it really is, and especially your point about the specific use case. Our customers are where they are now. The lines are blurring. So whether it's B2C or B2B as your example, or B2B2C, we need to have the right access technology to deliver that service. Mm-hmm. So I'm fortunate in my role that I have infrastructure as well as service responsibility, and so we want to pick the right access for that particular customer. So if I think about connected cars, autonomous vehicles and mining, those types of applications, I think 5G is obviously the right choice for us. But where we have more large enterprise customers with distributed branches, there's more variability, right? Just depending on where they might be, or the speeds that they might need, or the time to market that they might need. So I think these things all influence the choice.
Thank you very much. Thanks for a very concise and to the point. I'm glad there's general consensus in the room. Sometimes it actually makes for a boring discussion because everybody's agreeing with each other. It would be great if the panel said, I'm absolutely against every word that you just said. But I guess there's general consensus, and I guess that's where the technology is taking us. That's where we're going. So let me try and switch gears a little bit here and actually talk about complementary is the way to go in terms of technology. But then let's talk about sharing. Infrastructure sharing and the role that the providers, the towercos, data center companies, Fabio, I'm looking at yourself right now, for example. Yeah, data center companies. Towercos in the broader sense, in the current sense, as digital infracos, would have to play in that sharing. And I might want to come back, Dr. Rahman, to do again. Mr. Al-Marzouki is not present today, but you do have an Open RAN project together with Etisalat, correct? So
yes.
I guess this is a good example. It doesn't have to be the only one, not necessarily the only one that you want to comment on, but this is just a very good case in point. So maybe, what do you think about joint venturing, sharing infrastructure, or maybe even taking it a level deeper? Going away from just the passive infrastructure sharing, maybe going into data centers. And then I would like to, Femi, yourself and Fabio, yourself, maybe to comment afterwards as service providers, if that's okay, yeah?
Yeah.
Please.
So as you correctly mentioned, infrastructure sharing concept has evolved a lot in the past few years. As you rightly mentioned, you can share all the way from the radio all the way to the core, active sharing, passive sharing, and so on. I would say the advantages for an operator who's looking to share with someone else is the faster time to market, and let's say the agility in adding and removing services as required or as based on the operator's customer base.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, the operator who's offering their infrastructure for sharing, definitely one of the main advantage for them is an extra revenue stream. And if we go all the way with the recent infrastructure sharing concepts that you can reach to a state where you offer your infrastructure as a licensing model. So like infrastructure as a service and so on. So, and especially when it comes to 5G and later on 5G standalone and maybe probably 6G and so on, such concepts would be very important for that faster time to market and agility in services provided. Definitely this concept has its disadvantages. For example, for the operator who's trying to share, he would be confined with the operator he's sharing with in terms of their, let's say, available capacity, their availability, KPIs, availability, and other network parameters that the operator who wants to share cannot be really controlled. Mm-hmm. And they are under control of the lead operator. So I would say that's one of the main disadvantages, and this is where a proper framework or agreement framework should be in place that would really govern this relationship and these points together.
A related question. Now, considering the landscape in the United Arab Emirates, and considering that there are two major players, yeah, was tower sharing, even in the earlier days, ever a consideration for you? Or you're only moving into the sharing mentality now with the advent of 5G, and potentially, sharing of the RAN, of the Open RAN. How did it evolve?
No, actually it was there from day one regarding tower sharing and also our, I would say, indoor DAS sharing, the IBS sharing. So actually, and this allowed both operators from both ends to access new venues, new areas much faster than really building your own tower from scratch. And here our regulatory, the TDRA, has a big role in this, where they really encourage to have this tower sharing, especially to avoid having multiple towers within very close proximity to each other. For example, it won't really make sense having 2-3 towers that are within 50 meters or 20 meters from each other. So this is where really tower sharing becomes a viable concept to have.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, Fabio, Femi, I did say that you would comment next, but I just thought it would be a good segue, Mr. Al-Ali, before we go to that. When you and I actually discussed offline, we were talking about data centers, if you recall, and saying that potentially that could be an interesting direction, yeah, sort of the next step in terms of infrastructure sharing, not necessarily the fiber, not necessarily the towers. So perhaps some comments, you know, from your side in terms of where do you see, you know, for your firm, of course, but in general, that the infrastructure sharing market going?
Previously, let's say in the 2-3G era, operators were thinking to, let's say, to have some collaboration and share some towers or some infrastructure. Where we are going today, I think it is changing, especially with the introduction of many tower companies interested to buy, let's say, the towers from the mobile operators. We see it as a positive point because it will allow you to focus more into innovation, into digitization. A tower as a civil component is no longer, let's say, a competitive advantage how it used to be perceived. So I think it's good opportunity for mobile operators to, let's say, to get rid of those heavy kind of responsibilities that maybe requires a lot of efforts and investment. So definitely we see the direction of tower companies is a better option other than sharing. When it comes to infrastructure in general, MVNO is another example of sharing, whereby today we have a fourth operator operating in Kuwait as a virtual operator, MVNO. And we are the only, as STC, hosting in Kuwait an MVNO sharing all our infrastructure. Going back to the data center specifically, there is a lack of enough certified or tiered, tier 4 and tier 3 in the GCC. Kuwait specifically, we believe that there is a huge demand to attract hyperscalers and to serve businesses and help them to digitally transform faster. So data center is another topic. Fiber by itself, locally or internationally, and we as STC, we are proud to be one of the great players in the region when it comes to international fiber connectivity. So other than this, the remaining infrastructure sharing, we see them as legacy and no longer can support business to go moving forward. Thank you.
Understood, understood. Thank you very much. Thanks for that comment. Now, Engineer Al-Mufadda, when you and I spoke, we agreed that towers might not be necessarily of much interest to you, right? However, there are probably infrastructure sharing capabilities that you would also see, yeah? So could you share some of those?
Yes, okay. Let's see it from two different angles. When you're talking about infrastructure itself, as you see, this is the trend right now, everyone going for the tower co. Because previously, as operator, we've been competing each other, and we believe the only differentiator is expanding your footprint and having more sites. With the new player coming in the market, especially like MVNO, who utilizing your infrastructure, he able to compete with you. So he able to compete you using different services, quality services, applications, etc. So we've been trying to go into the infrastructure sharing. However, okay, with time, the TowerCo model became more attractive. Okay, and for us in Zain, we are finalizing this transaction. We are all in the final stage of selling our towers to a TowerCo. So we're gonna get rid from this, and we're gonna work into more to like a light CapEx model, where we will be able to focus on our services and application and having more advanced services to our customer, rather than to spending our efforts, energy, and money on building those civil constructions. This is from one aspect. The other aspect, and the more advanced way to do this sharing, is going for active sharing.
So for you, it's two-dimensional. It's CapEx, but it's also customer experience.
Exactly, exactly. And it's not only about sharing the infrastructure, also we're talking about sharing the active component, where we're gonna go for doing the active sharing, where there's some plenty trials going right now between different operators. And we believe that, okay, combining both, that you minimize the investment going toward TowerCo, and also extend this cost-efficient solution and going for active sharing will be the right formula for the future.
Thank you very much. Well, again, with the three operators at least that we have here, from the region, we have general consensus. Now, Mr. Fontana, for you, that's probably music to your ears, yeah? Now, you're here, you have several capacity, connected to NEOM, but I'm assuming here you're as CEO of ZeroPoint, which is a data center company, yeah? So maybe just a few words, considering, it's a younger company, than the others present. And also, what are your thoughts and what would be your takeaway from, the discussion that is taking place as it pertains to infrastructure sharing?
Absolutely. First of all, thank you for the invitation to this panel. Very happy to be here. Let me step back a little bit, even on the question you asked before between 5G and fiber. So as you may know, NEOM is a very fresh country in the top west part of Saudi Arabia. It's the size of Belgium.
Of course.
Just to give you an idea, 26,500 kilometers. It's a country where building started from scratch. So basically, we don't have anything when we start, about 3-4 years ago. So for us, we need both. We need fiber, we need 5G, but also we need connectivity, we lack connectivity with the satellites. We need all of them. Why we need all of them? Because we are building a country where we are obsessed on the sustainability and the impact we do to the future. So we are planning to build no more than 5% of the land. So when we build only no more than 5% of the land, you want to make sure that you can serve everybody. So you cannot serve everybody just with fiber. You cannot serve everybody just with 5G. You need both. Even you need the LEO connectivity. In some places, you cannot even have tower. So that's the reason why, for us, all the three, and I added the LEO connectivity, are important for us. When you look at sharing, the way we are building the data center company, why for us is important? When you build the connected city, that for us is the next step of the smart city, you need the three major foundations. One is the connectivity, one is the data center, and one is a connected solution that enable providing services using connectivity and the compute. So in order to do that, for us, since the beginning, we decided not to build everything with our own. I strongly believe in the ecosystem. So if you look at the data center company we're building, it's basically a data center company where we be agnostic to telco and to cloud provider. We want to make sure we are not locking in our customer, no matter it's a small enterprise or a big corporation, to a specific telco provider or to a specific cloud provider. So talking about co-location, we are creating a data center where we can welcome hyperscaler, welcome content provider, welcome service provider, and basically we can give to our customer the possibility to choose what they want. Even in terms of connectivity, because connectivity is not just the fiber 5G, we also have subsea cable. We want to make sure they have the option to choose whatever is the best in their capacity. Because you all know that there is no one cloud that fits all, so you need a multiple cloud provider. There is no one service provider that fits all, so you need to have all. So our idea is absolutely everybody is sharing, and make sure that we give our customer the option to choose.
Excellent, thank you. So I think this is a match well made from that perspective. Now, Mr. Oshiga, any comments from your side, as a provider from that standpoint? What you're hearing here, does that sort of confirm your understanding of the market and the direction of your company?
It's obviously impossible to disagree with the comments here. I mean, I think these are straightforward facts that everybody's expressed. Let me just add some flavor. Technology-wise, there's no dispute that the technology exists. Sharing an antenna, or cables, or radio, fiber infrastructure, and there are providers like ourselves who are prepared to provide that technology anywhere around the world. What are the issues? And maybe this is a discussion point I can throw out there.
Issues for sharing.
For sharing. So let's talk about tower sharing, for example. You get mergers between two operators. I've just come back from Asia. There's an operators merging in Thailand. Yeah. Joint number of towers, say 65,000. After a merger, they're going to decommission and end up with 45,000. That's money wasted in our industry, right?
But money wasted before. Now it's a synergetic effect.
Long before, looking for this synergetic effect, okay? Another type of issue that we need to get our heads around is India. So almost every operator, the big tower companies in India, many of them are still effectively owned by one operator or the other.
True.
So essentially, you're asking the investor to come in, but really you still own 60, 70% of that tower company. And it's just left pocket, right pocket, not very effective. India has 700,000 plus towers.
That's a lot of towers.
Way too many, and we're not extracting, as an industry, any value out of it. And the third example you gave was say, Kenya. I dare say, I'll mention the operator, Safaricom. They still have this first mover advantage, and it's so strong that they have 70% market share, and there's no point opening up that infrastructure to the next player to give them a chance to catch up. They would rather that their competitors invest to a point where they're close enough and then open it up, right? So the issues around infrastructure sharing to me are not much to do with technology, but rather can we get our heads around the commerce, right? And then can we bring new players in who know how to extract value and then simplify our operations and focus on revenue, top line.
So you, as CommScope, you find yourself working now as closely with the operators and with the tower cos, with the providers at the same time, or how is that mix changing for you over the years?
So today, that's very much my challenge within CommScope. Operators are very familiar with CommScope, and we're suppliers to the operator space. The tower companies are hesitant to get into the active space, which is unfortunate. We're trying to educate them. We meet many of them around the world, saying it's in your interest to go up the value chain to sell at least, to acquire at least a passive infrastructure. That, I think, is 2 years in the making, 3 years in the making to really get scale out of that.
Scale, okay.
Right now, they're smaller in terms of how much they spend on the kind of stuff that we provide.
Understood. Now, Mr. Miron, as VP of Networks for TELUS, yeah, are you facing some of those similar challenges, or you're past that? You passed the whole sharing dilemma, and you're at a sort of a different point in development, or how do you see that split, working for yourself and maybe some of your clients?
Well, so it's interesting, and I resonate with your comment about money wasted in the industry. So as we need to be more efficient as we roll out. In Canada, where we operate primarily, the industry is heavily regulated, including the ongoing debate about MVNOs and other operators sharing infrastructure. We are fortunate that we have an infrastructure sharing agreement with another operator in Canada on the RAN, and that I think that does allow us to, capitalize on geography and the efficiencies of moving out and being, moving more quickly. Of course, you have to, as you said, you have to look at as was mentioned earlier, the service aspect of that. So your customers are now on another infrastructure, and that can have the ramifications that if you have an incident or degradation or capacity planning. So all of these aspects that you need to manage along with your partner in that case, to ensure the end-to-end service of your customer. Yeah, so I think it's an interesting concept, and we see more and more of it. And as we virtualize the network and move our workloads out, I was very interested in the comments about leveraging the data center as you share data center space for workloads, and massively distributing our infrastructure, in that adds reliability as well, to our overall service. Yeah.
Thank you. So, when you were embarking, or as you were seeing the market embarking more and more on the sharing, and considering that a lot of you have mentioned sort of the wastefulness, which is, I guess, a regular, point in time. It's a normal development cycle for any company you invest, and then you say, well, maybe I don't need it anymore, and I will, I will consolidate as a result of that, do away. Did you see that sort of the political, and it's an open question to the room, from a political standpoint, that was difficult for some of the companies to come together because they did not want to, write off too many fixed assets that they've already, invested in and the capex already spent. Did you see any of that happening, or we were all very wise about it and said, well, what's done is done. Let's move to the next stage of our development. How did you? Anybody? Any comments on that one? Maybe you saw it from the outside. No?
Okay, I'll comment. Yes, we've seen a lot of it. But I think, as the operators on the panel here expressed, I think we're getting past that.
Yeah.
Whether in Asia or Africa or Middle East, there's a plethora of tower companies now. They've spent a lot of money buying these towers, and now they must extract value out of it. And the operators, having gotten rid of this cost, now need to show something on the top line and focus on revenue. So I think we're all in agreement, and that's happening. It needs to happen quicker.
That's good. I guess it's a positive thing. Market ultimately equalizes everything. Winston, I was, you being the thought leadership person, the consultant in the room, so to say, maybe you can help us sort of, put a baseline or help us, wrap up that subject by seeing if we can answer the following. From a business case standpoint, from a value case standpoint, what is that magical split between what is owned and what is shared? How do you see that, today, or maybe as we develop, where's that medium? Where's that, point where you say, this is actually good. We see the model working ideally in this scenario. And I appreciate that there's a geographical dimension, there's a history, dimension, how many operators we have, how developed the infrastructure is. But maybe some comments from you on that level, yeah?
Yeah. Thanks for inviting me. Great to be here. It was very interesting on the point on value, right? Because we have a lot of senior people here. As soon as you go back, someone kind of throws the numbers in front of you, right? So in the last 6 months, energy costs have gone up. Everybody's got a top line pressure, profitability pressure. But what's been really kind of a challenge and very interesting is that, let's say yesterday someone mentioned that there's about 300 billion already spent on 5G. And with this split, what's really happened is, and if you look at the valuation of companies, is for every telco which is there, their counterpart, TowerCo, is almost being valued twice that company, right? For the same $1 billion. And you're going to wonder why, right? Because you're doing more sophisticated customer experience products, but then a tower company gets valued twice your amount.
It's like a utility company, right?
Exactly. So it's a utility company. So if you kind of dig behind that, what's happening is a tower company has got that kind of utility, consistent annuity-driven kind of revenue. It's attracting big money like pension funds, right? So when you go in and you cut a check for $10 billion, you want to see how much can you start parking at the TowerCo and how much do you really extract value from your side, right? So from a financial engineering perspective, I think this trend will continue. And the tower companies also are very smart, right? They don't want to take any assets which will dilute that multiple, right? And this is where it puts the service providers in a kind of challenging framework because, as rightly pointed out, the last mile, the fibers are getting longer and longer. As Leslie pointed out yesterday, right, when you could look at new services like VR, AR, and others, there are some constraints in how much fiber versus 5G can handle that. So what's really going to happen is we see in the next few years that we talked about backhaul, and we have a talk later on Open RAN, and they also mentioned that some of the discussions are happening on Open RAN. It's going to add an extra level of fiber, which is front haul and mid haul. So you're looking at fiber investments going up, new use cases coming in. So let's say over the next 5 years, you're going to sink in another $1.2 trillion. Where do you park that money? Do you park it in a TowerCo? or you park it in your own business, because ultimately it's the valuation of the companies which kind of come in. And the way we are looking at models is fiber on its own, the payback is in dense areas is about 8 years. If it's a rural area, I think yesterday we talked about even satellites complementing to this. And that's why even in the next few years, 5G is going to have a complementary LEO standardization. So all this economics of 8 to 10 years is going to drive that over the next few years. And we see that what's going to happen is the compute part, which like the data center companies, are going to increasingly start partnering with some of the telcos. So irrespective of whether the service providers go into that model, I think some of the hyperscalers are going to also collaborate with the telcos. So that's where the kind of three big players, the compute people, the service providers, and the telcos, and the business models are going to evolve.
Makes sense. Thanks for summing it up for us. You know, in the time that we have left, I was hoping that we could also, you know, try to, you know, summarize it from the standpoint of where we all sit, you know, each one of us individually within our respective companies. We talked about, you know, 5G versus fiber, and, you know, apart from certain nuances, you know, 5G last mile, fiber to, you know, to the tower, fiber all the way, you know, 5G will carry us over until, you know, sort of, because ultimately, of course, you know, the latency on GPON is still less than on the 5G, but 5G is a very necessary and really upgraded component. And then, of course, let's see what the future brings with 6G and 10G. But from that standpoint, the question that I was going to try and tackle a little bit, and sort of like in short, from each one of you, and Dr. Ayman, I would start with you. Where do you see yourself investing in the medium term? Yeah, sort of what is that investment strategy for you? And then Mr. Al-Ali and Engineer Al-Mufadda will ask you to comment on the same, and then Mr. Miron, yourself, and then the two non-operators, I will ask the same, because, you know, your investments well, you know, you're a mirror of the business model of the operator, so it was very interesting to understand what you would be investing in moving forward. So, Dr. Ayman, starting with yourself.
From the way we see it, any successful investment should satisfy, or it has three characteristics really. It should provide a competitive price. It should provide a timely responsiveness to customer requirements, and a quick and reliable connection. So, and considering what has happened in the past few years in terms of traffic growth and technology evolution, the way we look at it is we put everything together in terms of customer feedback, customer sentiment, our own network quality checks, benchmarks, and definitely one of the most important factors is the commercial forecast across all bases and across all product portfolios. So from this standpoint of view, we put all of these together and we try to come up with the most viable, I would say, investment for this year and the coming years. Definitely, it's a continuous exercise. So you don't do it and then you stop. There are continuous workshops, meetings that have to take into place in order to evaluate, in order to reallocate, to readjust, adjust, top up, and so on the plan as you move on. And using this has allowed us to really find a sweet spot between the potential investment amount that we have put in versus the missed market opportunities, satisfying both the technical needs and the business requirements. So we'll definitely keep building on top of that, looking at the use cases that we need to drive for our 5G, whether it was on the existing 5G infrastructure or the coming standalone 5G infrastructure.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Mr. Al-Ali, from your standpoint, does that echo your thought process in terms of future investments?
We took digital transformation as a key pillar in our strategy. Actually, it's fueling our strategy. Not only digitalizing ourselves, but also digitizing Kuwait, our market. The reason for that, we believe it will enrich the customer experience, where it is our key focal area, name it on different verticals, through the horizontals that we have. How do we do this? Today, I don't think we have enough data about every, let's say, vertical in the market. Today, a lot of efforts, human being efforts, are put to run certain operations, keeping the people that we have, which we are expecting a lot of innovation from, keeping them busy running operations. So we kicked start 3 years ago, intensive digital transformation from back-end systems, from front-end systems. We injected some robotics in our operations, whereby today this is happening automatically, let's say, or in an automated way. All what our customers need to do is just to log to our website or to our mobile app or using chatbot. How this can be done better, having a better data, let's say, analytics platforms that will help you understanding further your market and the need of your customers. Other than this, we spoke about 5G, which as a connectivity is the base to connect the unconnected, let's say again. So digital transformation is what will keep us, let's say, busy investing on.
So more you're seeing investments in over-the-top services rather than the infrastructure itself, investment in towers. Are you seeing that happening also?
See, today, what's making us a unique, or let's say differentiated from any other competitor, is how we focus not only on our coverage. Today, as a customer experience, we noticed, let's say, during COVID or even after COVID, people started to like dealing with machines.
Started to like it.
To like it.
Yeah, okay.
So what is happening, what we are seeing today, hence we adopted the chatbots. We saw huge growth on even our care channels. So you see your customers today, they are liking to go and talk to a chatbot. They like to go to a self-care and do all their transactions through the self-care or to your e-store. So, yes, so that's it.
Understood.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Al-Ali. And Al-Mufadda, any?
I believe that when you're talking about any future investment, we need to ask ourselves 3 questions. Is it future-proof? Is it addressing customer needs? Is it cost efficient?
Absolutely.
So we need to make sure that when we are building our strategy and roadmap that, okay, we are using the latest trend and latest technology, and we need to make sure that solution addressing the requirement from different customers and different segments, and to make sure that our solution are resilient as well, okay? Going back to the point, and you're going to link this with the sharing, okay? Also, we hope that, okay, for us as an operator, we need to think in a way that while we are competing each other, how we can cooperate even more and more. At the end, we don't want, hopefully that after 5 years from right now, we don't want to sit in the same stage talking about the waste we had in the past years in the active component, similar to what we did in the Pacific.
Yeah, understood. Thanks very much for that perspective. Now, Mr. Miron, from standpoint of Canada, like you said, huge territory, population, sometimes very low density. Does does it echo with the Middle Eastern operators, or your investment strategy is altogether different?
I wouldn't say that they're altogether different, but I would say, I mean, you've captured it well. We have, you know, a population of, say, 38 million people spread across, you know, 5,000 kilometers of space.
Right.
Then, you know, most of the population living, you know, close to the U.S. border. So you see those large population densities, of course. But, you know, much of the population is distributed. So connecting communities is a very big part of our investment strategy as we go forward, and that's a long-term strategy, both in 5G and in fiber. And as we make those investments, we obviously want to look at, you know, not just the return, which is important, but, you know, our environmental impact as we do that as well. So as we modernize and bring new technologies to market. Reliability is a large part of, you know, our value proposition. It's lots of investment in making sure we've got highly resilient networks, and that we do that the right way for the geography that we have, which is, you know, can be very different from, you know, doing that in large, in densely populated areas. And then finally, you know, I think end user experience. So bringing those humanized, digitized experiences to our customers so that we can, you know, empower them quickly, you know, where they are, and get to market more quickly, which then drives that return that we were talking about. So I think those are some of the high points for us.
Excellent, thank you. So not altogether different. There are definitely geographical peculiarities, but based on the four speakers, Mr. Fontana, that you just heard, and, you know, their investment focus, and I appreciate that, you know, the investment focus, you know, we didn't specifically say this is going to be ours and all ours, and this is going to be shared, i.e. co-invested into. But perhaps, you know, there's a niche that you would see in terms of as a provider, you know, into what your investments then could be to actually help some of the strategic development of the companies that we heard from.
Yeah, absolutely. As I said, our objective is to build a cognitive city. You know, when you build a cognitive city, you don't want to be only thinking like a smart city. Smart city for us is reactive, is using only 9% of the data. So when you build a cognitive city, you're going to use about 90% of the data. So it's a big shift. And we had the advantage that we don't have legacy. So our investment is fully dedicated as much as we can on soft asset to build a cognitive city. So how we can enable people to share data, to maximize the use of the data. That's what we're focusing on. So definitely, we co-invest and we co-share all the infrastructure. That's what we want to do. But we put, I would say, at least 70% of our investment in a soft asset that can enable cognitive solution, that can enable metaverse. Because if you look at NEOM, NEOM will be ready in 10 years. You know, 2030 is the vision. So people doesn't need to wait 2030 to discover NEOM. So you can discover NEOM with the metaverse. You can start looking what is going to happen over there. So you can start experiencing when you come all the full of NEOM, leveraging 90% of the data. So that's exactly what we want to do. And the cognitive is enable you to do that. That's where we put the majority of investment. So going from smart to cognitive, so the majority is a soft asset.
Well, that's great. And like you say, there's no legacy, so you're sort of, you know, you have the luxury of a fresh look and actually investing, you know, based on the needs of the moment. You know, there are no old servers for you to write off. Yeah, no data centers to close down. Yeah. Yeah.
Even on the data center, as I said, we never plan to build our cloud. You know, people were telling me, "Are you building NEOM cloud?" No. Why I need to build NEOM cloud? You know, there is cloud provider. Let's leverage them. Let's co-locate them. Let's share the data center we have. Let's make sure we get all of them. What we are doing, going back to the soft asset, we are building what we call the cloud portal, that is a marketplace of cloud. So every enterprise, because there is no one cloud that fits all, can choose the one they want, for the need they want, for the industry they want, for the time they need. That's exactly what we do.
Yeah, it's important. So you've touched upon that. So distributed cloud is basically something that you're actually looking at as a business model for yourself.
Yeah, and we believe both in edge and core. You need both of them. You know, when you have autonomous car, you need edge, but not everything is on the edge, not everything on the core. You know, you need data center because most of the content providers have an issue of latency, so they need to have a compute power in NEO, but doesn't need to be everything on the edge. It need to be distributed, depend on the application, the services you have.
Thank you very much for that insight. Mr. Oshiga, you did mention before that your traditional model was working directly with the operators. It's converting to actually working with a broader set of stakeholders right now, also with the providers. Now, when you answer the question about investment, could you also talk about sort of your go-to market? Because I think that also mirrors a little bit how the landscape might be looking for us in the next few years.
I'll be happy to do that. Let me just preface one or two anecdotes, if you would like. 5G is not cheap, right? If you look at ARPUs in Japan, Korea, Thailand, anywhere in Africa that does have any element of 5G, Gulf, maybe a few exceptions, ARPUs are going down with the advent of 5G. ARPUs, not cost, ARPUs, going down, not up.
But we see that as a general trend. ARPU is going down.
Correct, but you would think that
with the 5G that it should be going up.
That trend.
Everybody's saying, give me that 5G, I want to pay more. Yeah, okay. That would be an excellent predicament.
So you've got to be conscious of cost, right? Add to the fact that a lot of the 5G benefits would come with mid-band spectrum 3.5, and that means a lot more site assets out there. The idea that you wouldn't share in some way is probably a risky one. If you look at the fiber side, I'll throw another fact out there. Only a year and a half ago, all of Africa had 2,000 fiber lines. The idea that anyone will build fiber assets and not opening up for sharing, or build it with the intent that it is shared, again, given that that needs to be the backhaul of anything we put on it, 5G, 4G, whatever else, FTTX, again, would be folly, right? And then one more thing, Winston talked about green energy. In most countries in the world, the biggest cost of building a data center is power. I've been to some data centers where the power room is 3 times the size.
Well, that's why they're built close to energy generating units a lot of the time.
And the power room is 3 times the size of where you actually find the racks. And when you move beyond some higher ARPU countries, the idea that you would not share that, again, I would think is not very wise. In terms of vendors like ourselves, we adapt. Right? So instead of sharing 3 simple, selling to a customer 3 relatively simple antennas, we sell one that is capable and all-in-one and a bit more complex and can do it all. The technology exists, and so we, like you said, we just mirror what the requirement is from our customers, be that a network operator, or like you said, I see that a year or 2 from now, it will be more tower companies, data center type companies. We're already working with the likes of Facebook, Amazon, and the like, and I think that will continue and come into the wireless side of things as well.
Understood. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for this feedback. Now, Winston, coming back to you, and actually we're on time. No pressure, though. I think we started a bit early, yeah? So, from your standpoint, just to wrap this up, what do you see as the long-term evolution of the business model?
Yeah. So like I mentioned, these 3 companies have to sit together, right? You have the service providers, the data center companies, and the towercos. And they literally have to work out the reduction cost per GB, right? So ARPU is not increasing. So literally, the way we have been helping clients is looking at profit per gigabyte, right? And then to mirror that, you have profit per compute, right? Because those are the 2 things which are going to bring all the use cases together in the next few years. Now, the interesting thing is companies like TELUS, they are also moving away from a service provider. Like now, if I understand, it's about 25% of your revenue is coming from healthcare, right? So they're moving almost from a purely service provider to that kind of space. So if you just keep those 2 KPIs in mind, the cost per GB, the cost per compute, I think we have to add this almost carbon footprint compute and carbon footprint per GB, right? And I think that will drive the motivation. I think very soon we'll start having companies report those kind of metrics, And it's going to bring those business models together because people are going to start saying that, is $1 billion of my investment better placed in the compute company, TowerCo, to be shared across different companies, or should I hold it myself as a uni-tenant, right?
Right.
And I think that motivation will drive the business model. And I think tower companies will start owning a bit more sharing of assets. But if you take it to the extreme, like if you just look at the room, there's about 1 terabyte of memory just in our phones, right? Why do we need that, right? If connectivity is so good, then do we all need to have these expensive handsets? We talked about thin clients and desktops and so on. So maybe that direction also will come. Maybe the service providers will start owning some of that infrastructure which is there in the handsets because you're going to have 7 billion people in the next 5-6 years having handsets. So I think those are the business models we need to look at is where do you place the infrastructure between these 3 big companies, basically.
Thank you, Winston. And thanks for, summing it up for us. I think, thank you very much for this discussion. I think this is an excellent subject, of course. Not to say that it's completely new. We did talk about it, for several years. It's been, brought up in Barcelona also. I mean, for quite some time. But nevertheless, I think, thank you very much to the esteemed panel for giving us this 360 view on the matter, both in terms of the development of the infrastructure, investment in 5G, and also what we need to do alone and what we can do together. So thank you very much.
Cheers. Thank you.
Thank you.